So a couple years ago, it's kind of died out a little bit now, but I was pretty big into the musical Hamilton that became kind of a little bit of a sensation. Some of you might be familiar with it. Maybe you've listened to the soundtrack. Maybe some of you haven't. But it's a musical that was kind of built off of the life of Alexander Hamilton, who actually, true story, was one of my favorite American history figures in high school, which is such a nerdy thing to say, but like many of you know me already, so this can't be shocking that I have like a favorite American history character. But one of the concepts in the show that I thought was interesting, and that it's going to jump into what we're talking about tonight, is this idea of Hamilton is a character who is never ever satisfied. There's always something else. There needs to be a continual sense of movement and advancement. And there's a scene in the show where they've won the American Revolution and he's being asked to go and serve in the first cabinet of George Washington. And he tells his wife, I need to go, I need to lead. And his wife says, look around you. Isn't your family enough? Am I not enough? Is our son not enough for you? Isn't this enough? But he decides he still needs to go on. And I think this question of isn't where we are enough, a question that we need to ask ourselves more. Because I think that we actually, we ask, is this enough? And then we tell ourselves, no, it's not. More. Whether it's because you have this kind of insatiable drive in yourself that says, I need to do more than this, because I think so. Whether it's somebody else that you're chasing after the opinion of, whether it's kind of media or culture telling you that you need to be more like this to matter or be significant. We need to be able to say this is enough. We need to find something to rest in. And a huge part of rest is satisfaction. And it is hardwired in most of us to never be satisfied. Right? We want better grades. We want to be able to theoretically get into a better school someday so we can get a better job, have a better boyfriend or girlfriend so they can be a better husband or wife, have a better appearance. And we're in this pause series. We're talking about how do we start this year being able to not just hurry on, make the best, biggest, strongest goals, but how are we stopping, letting our bodies rest and catch up, and not just kind of be lethargic or lazy, but pause and rest in the one who's able to give us a little bit of a boost. And as we look at this pause, we can't avoid looking at the fact that we often are totally averse or afraid of the idea of satisfaction. And today we're going to be looking at the 23rd Psalm, which is a very popular psalm. And the first verse reads like this. Maybe you memorize this and you know it. It says this. It says, the Lord is my shepherd. I lack nothing. I lack nothing. Because the Lord is my shepherd. Is this where you are? Is this where I am? It's a question that we as leaders and me, I need to ask this of myself. What in your life do you feel like is enough for you? This is a question for all of us. As we look at the 23rd Psalm, we need to ask the question, is God enough? It says, the Lord is my shepherd. I lack nothing. Is this the mindset we have in our life? Is God enough for you? We're going to look at three things. Ask ourselves three questions as we look at this pretty short psalm. We're going to ask, are you willing to rest? Are you willing to follow? And are you willing to wait? Is God enough for you? How can we find our satisfaction in Him? First question we need to ask is, are we willing to rest? Verses 2 through the first part of verse 3 of Psalm 23 reads like this. It says, He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul. When we ask whether God is enough for you and for me, we have to ask this question, are we willing to rest, right? It talks about a shepherd leading us, his sheep, down to a place of rest, green pastures. We don't have to worry about whether there's enough for us. There will be. Beside a quiet water where our souls can be refreshed. Again, the reason we're talking about this subject now is because I truly believe that if we were all to be honest with ourselves, this idea of someone refreshing your soul is something that we all badly crave, but few of us can say that we're actually genuinely living in that place. We may have a lot going on. We might even be happy with the things that we're doing, but are we refreshed? Will you acknowledge that you can step away and say that it's good enough to move on, and let yourself pause, because you have the shepherd who refreshes you. And I think for us, we often we kind of want God to be a battery to do all the things that we want to do, when God says, listen, no, I'm not going to be your battery, but I am going to be your shepherd, and I'm going to lead you to the place where you can rest, not just try to busy yourself some more. Because what I desire most is you, not these things that you want me to be able to do through and for you. You know, we say to God kind of, you know, he's where is he when I need him? Or I want him to be there when I need him, but we need to learn to rest in him as well. We need to know when we need refreshment, and we need it all the time. But it's something that we don't want to do because we don't want to have to stop, I think, to do it. There was a time recently, my wife and I, we went to a wedding in October for my cousin, and we were driving back from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, so it's about a 4-hour drive, and my gas was getting low in the car, and we had maybe like an hour to go. We had just gotten off the turnpike, maybe 20, 30 minutes to go on the drive, actually. And we got off the turnpike, and there was this place where I could have driven out of the way to get to gas, or I could have tried to make it the rest of the way home. And I ended up going for the gas, but man, that was a tough decision, because honestly, even though my car needed the gas, I didn't want to stop because I wanted to be where I was. It was 11 o'clock at night. All I really wanted to do was get home so I could unpack my crap and go to sleep. But you know what the truth is? I was way more relaxed after I stopped to get gas. Because if I maybe could have made it all the way home and then collapsed on my bed after I packed, and I'd have been 5 or 10 minutes earlier, fine. But I would have been stressed out every inch of the way, because I wouldn't have known if I had enough or not. And this is how we operate in our lives, I think, so much of the time. If I stop and do this thing, what if I don't have enough to make it? There are other things that demand my attention, so we keep going and going and going, and you know what eventually happens is we run out of gas. We blow up at our parents or our friends. We totally drop the ball on a test or an assignment. We just feel drained out of it. It feels inconvenient to stop, to pause, to let God fill you up. But you know, it's exactly what we need. One of the huge reasons it's so hard for us to reset is we bury ourselves in things that kind of become what we define ourselves with. Right? We talked in Connection about how would you define yourself, or how would you think people would define you? And I think this often is why we are so unwilling to let ourselves rest, because we are these things. And if we're not doing something to become these things better, then it's a real problem, right? I'm the smart one. So if I'm not spending all my time studying or getting A+ all the time, there's something fundamentally wrong with me. And if I can't be that thing, I'm nothing. Same if you're an athlete. I need to do all these things. I need to attend all these optional practices. I need to fill every waking hour with this, no matter what the cost to my body or to my mind. Or I'm the Christian kid. I need to make sure that I kind of have a holier-than-thou attitude all the time, that I build rules around the rules to keep myself from doing something that people would say, you're a bad Christian. For some of us, we're the lone wolves. I know we're out here, right? We form our identity in how kind of apart from everything we are. We get a sense of kind of satisfaction from being able to say I'm over and above these things. I don't need these friends. I don't need to be close to people. And so we run ourselves tired. We run ourselves away from things that are good for us and restful and refreshing, because we allow ourselves to be defined by these things. And honestly, we like it. We tell ourselves this is who we are. And when we can say that I'm this, and we do the things that kind of satisfy that, it makes us feel good. But ultimately, it's going to run us down. When we're defined by friends and networks, and it runs counter of the idea of rest, because it's tough to see that when you talk about rest, you're saying, listen, I can pause. I can let this shepherd refresh my soul, lead me by these quiet waters, because you know what? He actually is enough for me. And my identity on my sports team, my identity in my school, my friend group, and my family, those things all come second. He's enough. And because he's enough, I can rest in him? What if you rooted yourself instead with God instead of these other things? What if he became the one who gives you your identity? What you'll find is resting from some of those things that can seem very stressful, but it's less so when you're letting yourself be defined not by what those things can give you, but what you've been given on the cross, by what God says about you. Are you willing to rest? This is why we're talking about this. Are you willing to let yourself be refreshed, find your identity in something that's actually going to be longly satisfying? Next thing we're going to say is, are you willing to follow? The next question we have to ask, the second part of verse 3. In verse 4, it says this. It says, he guides me along the right paths for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. Are you willing to follow after God where he leads us? And I think the first part of this sounds great, right? It says he guides me along the right paths. And for some of us, we need to hear that reminder because we're not sure that God has followed us along the right paths. Then we need to look at the next part of the verse too, because that's just as important. Not only does it say that, listen, if God is our shepherd, if he's enough for us, we can trust that he can lead us down the right paths. But the next verse says, even though I walk through the darkest valley. And it's funny that these two are right next to each other, because when we think of the right paths, we don't think of dark paths. We don't think of dark valleys, sometimes translated the shadow of death. This isn't what we like to think about. If it's the right paths, then it won't be the bad places. But what if the right path is through the dark place? Are you willing to follow there? I think for many of us, we're willing to follow as long as the path is bright. But if the path goes into a dark place, then we convince ourselves that God isn't there with us. If God's paths are right, then we can follow him into the darkest valley. And you know what? Sometimes the path God has for us is going to lead us into those valleys to refine our hearts in ways that make us more dependent on him. I've told you stories about where I was in college. The seasons of depression that I've had to struggle through, and I'm going to tell you what, I wouldn't have chose any of those things, but that was the right path for me. He used those things. He redeemed those things in my life. I'll fear no evil, for you are with me. It's a beautiful thought, but it takes us recognizing that even if we go through those dark paths, those are actually God's right paths, and that's not always easy for you or for me. And when we go back to this, the broader question, is God enough for you? The truth is, when you and I seek our satisfaction somewhere else, the dark valleys become evidence of abandonment, not evidence of God's presence. We don't look for him. And I think too often we have very clear ideas of what it should look like to follow God. And so then when it doesn't, there's huge friction. It's like every stereotype you've ever seen on movies or TV of the three-legged race, right? Where two people end up with their legs tied together, and they have to do everything in total synchronization, but what happens is they both go different directions, and then nobody's happy. It's like, you're supposed to do this. We're supposed to walk this way. What happens if you're willing to follow and let them lead and walk in step with them? The end of all those episodes, any three-legged race episode or episode where two characters are handcuffed together, right? It starts horrible because they're not willing to agree on the direction, but then finally they come to a recognition they have to work together. We need to be willing not just to work together with God, but to follow under God. If you're willing to follow, you have to give up a degree of control. We talk about this often, and it's because it's true, and it's because it's hard for you and for me. It's hard to give up control. Let's think about where maybe are you hesitant to follow God more. Maybe you're a senior and it's in making the choice about what to do next year. Maybe you don't have to be a senior for that to be an applicable question for you. Maybe it's in viewing your school where you are as a place for you to be missional, to look and see students who are hurting, who need to come to church and to get exposed to Jesus. Maybe it's considering asking Jesus to forgive your sins, because you come here, but it doesn't mean necessarily that you're following Jesus because you've made up your mind that this isn't for you, it's something stupid, it's something foreign. But you know something's missing, you know something's broken. And maybe you need to be willing to say, maybe God, you know what? I need something. And when I keep hearing, I don't want to believe it, but it sounds like you've got something that I'm missing. Maybe that's what following looks like for you tonight. I'll tell you what, staying put feels safe. Being able to say, listen, if the path is going toward the darkest valley, God, I'll stay over here or I'll try over this way because that doesn't look very good to me. It can feel safe for us to stay put. But while we're called to rest, and that's true and that's a good thing, there are also times when we're called to get up and follow. When we take time to rest in God, studying his word, finding new beautiful things about how he is and how he loves us, spending time in community, getting challenged and pushed on a Wednesday night or a Sunday night by other believers, that can fill us up and then recognize that we're called to get up and follow. Are you willing to rest? Are you willing to follow? And the last thing we're going to see as this psalm concludes is, are you willing to wait? Verses 5 and 6 read like this. It says, you prepare before me in the presence of my enemies. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely your goodness and your love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. The image he's setting up is victory, it's celebration. It's you being exalted over your enemies. And I think for some of us, we go to school, we see the people who are making choices that are not the choices that we're making, and we don't see any punishment ever. And so we kind of wonder, are these choices actually worth it? Because it doesn't seem like it makes a difference what I do or not. So why bother with any of it? What this passage here, what this part of it challenges us to think of is, are you willing to wait? Because this is a promise, but it doesn't always feel like it's right now for you and for me. It's not my reality that I feel like my enemies are before or kind of seated before me with when there's a table in my presence. My cup does not always feel like it's overflowing. But if he's enough, if he's my shepherd, this is the path. This is what will happen. And I've got to be willing to say, God, I'm not seeing this right now, but I can say what verse 6 says. It says, surely goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life. I know this is going to happen and that I will be in the house of the Lord forever. And because I can trust in that, even though I don't see it, I can wait on that. But being patient sucks. When I was maybe in late elementary school, I really wanted this video game. I wanted Mario Party 2, which is kind of like, it makes me feel very old because now there's like Mario Party 20, it feels like. But I wanted Mario Party 2. And I told my parents, I thought I had enough money, and I was like, listen, I want to get this game. So my parents, they put their heads together and they came to me and they said, okay, Jack, I've got a proposition for you. You can get the game now, and you can use your money on it, and that's fine. We can get it for you today. Or you can wait, not get this game right now. And every week you wait, your dad and I will pitch in $5 against the cost. So if you wait longer, you won't have to pay as much of your money. And I thought about it for like 5 minutes. And then was like, I'll take it now, actually. That'll be just fine. I know I could save money, but I'd like this thing now. So I'm going to do that thing, but thank you for the offer. And it's funny that still actually is something that I can remember very clearly. Like I can remember my parents' bedroom. I can remember the conversation because I can think to myself now and say, what? Dude, you threw money away. Like, what are you doing? But I wasn't seeing the game now. And if I could get it now, then why would I bother waiting? We don't think about what's going to happen 2 days from now, 2 years from now. Right? In our connection group, we were talking about how we can't see past this, right? We said, well, nobody's into me right now, so no one will ever possibly find me attractive. And that's not the case. You don't know that. And more to the point, The thing about that is it comes right to the conversation we're talking about today, which is you're letting yourself be defined by something other than God. And when you're defined by God, you can be in the happiest marriage or the happiest not marriage and totally satisfied, because that's not, your identity is not found in whether you have a husband or a wife or whether you don't. You know, some of us have been going along with this challenge of saying we're not going to use our social media for the month of January. And I think one of the reasons it's such a big deal is because for you and me, what social media gives us is exactly the thing we crave, which is absolute immediacy. Anything that I want from another person, relationally, for my own sense of satisfaction, I can put it out there, I can get it immediately. And in fact, I expect it immediately. If somebody leaves me on read for 2 minutes, then clearly there's a problem. We want feedback, we want affirmation, we want it now. You know what? We have to ask some more questions, right? Why do so many teenagers or young adults, an issue that comes to mind, like with its immediacy issues, why do so many people struggle with pornography and premarital sex? Yeah, we're talking about it. It's okay. You're big people. You can hear those words. Why do they struggle with it? Because why the heck should you wait? I don't know. People growing up in church do this. They say, listen, I know what the Bible says about this stuff, but how can I be sure that if I wait, it'll actually ever turn out for me? I know where I can get the satisfaction now. So what's the point in waiting? And if you're not a Christian, you know, why in the world should I be held to any kind of standard at all? I want to do what makes me feel good now. There's no big man in the sky anyhow, so why in the world? But for us as Christians, there's something we want that we're not getting. And sometimes it's because we don't trust that we actually ever will. And so maybe those extremes are not your stories, but maybe it is, or maybe it's somebody who knows. But we seek satisfaction in all kinds of counterfeit ways. And we can get them quickly. We can get them easily. Our society is very good at giving you anything you want as soon as you want it. Except for the things that actually are most valuable, and those are the things that require pause, rest, and patience. Those things don't just get handed out. But it's because we don't sometimes really trust. If I wait, there's no guarantee it's going to pay off. So I might as well experience it. What about suicide, right? It's the same thing. We find ourselves in spirals of depression where we don't see any value in our life. And what we see is, I right now can't see beyond this. There is no way it could ever get any better than this. And we're not willing to wait because we're letting ourselves be defined by the right now. Guys, I've been there. I've felt that. And yeah, there are times where you feel like it's never going to get better than this. But thank goodness we have a God that sees beyond what we're in the moment. God is meant to be enough for each and every one of us, but we are all going to be tempted every day to look for someone or something else to fulfill us. That is the nature of sin, us finding ourselves somewhere else and letting ourselves be defined by those things. But because the Lord is my good shepherd, and he can be yours too, because he is the shepherd who lays down his life for his sheep. In the Gospels, it talks about how Jesus defines, listen, I am the good shepherd. And you know what a good shepherd does? A good shepherd doesn't just let a wolf come into the pen and eat the sheep. He'll die for the sheep. And this is what Jesus did for you and for me. Because that's true, I can say confidently that he is my shepherd, and I do lack nothing. And you know what? I can say that, and I know that it's true, but you know what's going to happen tomorrow morning? I'm going to wake up, and there are going to be things that are going to threaten that truth. And it's easy for me to say tonight, and it's easy for you to be able to say, yeah, I want that tonight. But it's going to be hard tomorrow and the next day. But it doesn't mean that it's not true just because we're not always feeling it. Are you willing to stop seeking your enoughness in your grades, your performance on the sports field, your performance on the stage, and your friends, in the likes that you get on a post? You know, my social media started sending me emails today saying, we miss you. Come look what's going on. I hate to say it, but it's not mutual. I do not miss it. I know some of you do. But I guarantee you that as much as it misses you, it can't actually give you what you need from it. And that's the point. For some of you, it's wrestling. What you're wrestling with tonight is, listen, what's this God done for me anyway? I want to encourage you, if you're in that position, to keep wrestling. Keep wrestling. Keep asking questions. Don't be afraid of that.
Sorry.
But for others, it's examining, what are the things that you've let define you? And what is it going to take to try to surrender some of that? Because you and I are never going to be satisfied until we are satisfied in the one who is able to be our satisfaction, and that's Jesus Christ, because of what he's done for us. Let me pray, and then we'll dismiss. God, I need you to be enough for me tonight. And God, you were meant to be enough for each of us. But I pray for each student here that you would help them to see that you can be. That these things that we chase after so often can't fill us up. But that we would be willing to rest and pause, that you are a good shepherd who can refresh us in a way that we so desperately need. And I pray that refreshment over each and every student here. I pray for those who are still angry at you for things that you've done to them, the reasons that their lives are, and they say, God, I don't want any part of you, but God, you are still chasing them, and I pray that they would know that even as though they run, you're still ready for whenever they turn around. God, I pray that you would remind us again of how loved we are by you. Thank you for the promise of the cross, and we pray these things in your name and for your kingdom's sake. Amen.